So as you heard us talk about last week, we wanted to take this time intentionally this week that we normally use for our sermon, where usually Pastor Wendy or I speak and teach. We feel like it's important for us to be in a posture of listening as a church right now, especially those of us who are white and are really trying to understand and need to learn a little bit more about the experience of people of color, not just in our own church, but people of color in this country and in this world. And so today we're giving up our sermon time intentionally to listen to the voices of our community, speak up about their experience of this moment. We have a number of video submissions where we simply asked people of color who go to Mission Gathering, who call this church home, to share with us what's on their mind right now, what they would like us to know, what they're experiencing. And so we're going to hear over the next 15 and 20 minutes their stories, their testimonies, and I just want to invite you, whoever you are watching this right now, to keep an open mind and an open heart, and listen for what God might be trying to teach you through the lives and experiences of people in our community.
Good morning, church. I had too many thoughts about the last 2 weeks that it was better for me to read the message that I wanted to convey. During my 50 plus years, I had my share of police injustice. I have been stopped numerous times only because of the color of my skin. But during my 3 minutes, I wanted to convey a different version of how I feel right now. Instead of sharing my experience with police, I want to thank all races that have been protesting for Black Lives Matter during the past 2 weeks. Black people have been protesting for decades that white cops and the Justice Department has blatantly killed and jailed us. But during the past 2 weeks, I have seen more white people, more Latino people, more Asian people, and also including other countries protesting Black Lives Matter and Black equality. I drove by the protest last Saturday, and out of 1,000 people I seen, only 10% was Black. People all over the world seeing firsthand how Black people are treated with George Floyd's last words, "I cannot breathe." There will be a change because Congress and the government see white people on the streets risking their lives during this coronavirus epidemic to stop the obvious persecution of Black people. This generation will not allow this horrible injustice to continue to happen. So I want to say thank you to all people that took a stand on to say Black Lives Matter. We have struggled long enough, over 400 years of depression. America sees our pain, our struggles, and our injustice. It's time to put our differences aside and realize I'm just like you, but darker. That was a joke. The main reason I like this church is for one reason, inclusive. That means to me, we don't see color or sexual preference. We are here for one goal, to praise and worship God and bring as many people we can into the light. I want to give you scriptures about what the Bible says about racial equality. Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Acts 10:34. Peter said, God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. God loves everyone equal. It does not matter the color of your skin or how you identify. Mark 12:31. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than this. And my last verse to end my statement, my favorite, John 13:34. A new commandment I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. Martin Luther King had a dream. I too have a dream. I'm going to steal those 3 words from Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day, all across the world, people will come together just to protest Black Lives Matter. Thank you, church, for giving me this opportunity to express my gratitude for the things you do to help me be a better person. Thank you for protesting Black Lives Matter. You guys show me the real meaning of Christianity. There's a change coming to America, and you started it. I appreciate you. I admire you. I adore you for doing what is right. Thank you, Pastor Brandon, for this time. Thank you, church. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We will get through this together.
Floyd, over the past years that we've known each other, you've told me a lot of stories about interactions with police, times that they've harassed you, even though you've never been arrested for doing anything wrong. Can you tell me about one of those times again?
Yes. I was stopped while walking black. I came home. I was walking home from Grossmont College. I had a night class. It was raining that night. We lived in the neighborhood, and was walking home, and a police car pulled up in front of me, and in front of me there was a driveway to block me off. Cops got out, real aggressively and told me to spread eagle on the ground
In the rain?
in the rain. They asked me if I had any drugs or guns on me and searched my backpack. I had nothing but books in it from college. I had no guns on me, no drugs or anything. And then they told me the reason why we stopped you because we never seen you in the neighborhood. So I was stopped while walking black. So I've had several other instances being stopped in my vehicle with college students. One incident is I gave a friend a ride home from Cuyamaca College. There was a strip mall on the way that was close to his home. He says, "You can drop me off at the strip mall." Well, we sat there and we showed the breeze in the car, not bothering anybody, talking about our classes and everything. And next thing we know, 2 police cars pulled up in front of us, and I didn't know one was right behind us with his gun drawn. And but before all that happened, my white friend who was with me never really believed stuff like that really happened. Well, that day it really happened with me and him. They told us to get out. As a young black male, I was always given that talk. You don't talk back to policemen. And I didn't talk back to them, but my white friend did. When he asked the policeman, "Well, what did we do?" And they told him, "Well, we got a report there was a salt and pepper team." In other words, a salt and pepper team is a white and black male casing a bank. We're sitting in my car, college students, not bothering anybody. You know, it's pretty shameful. You can't sit in your car as 2 college students and just be normal. So that, you know, it really affected him. Me, I was given that talk by my parents with the policeman. You don't talk back to him. You do what you were told so you can go home. But him, as a white male, he could talk back to policemen. You know, so that's one incident that happened to me. I'm age 60 now. I've been stopped while walking, being black, and my vehicle stopped. And at age 60, it really affects me to this day, 60 plus.
So as we have spent the last few weeks participating in protests and listening to the people around us and soliciting videos from people of color sharing their own experiences, we've really been motivated to listen to people who can speak to the moment that we're in. And one of the things that we realized was that in our own congregation, we have a police captain from Chula Vista, and he's second in command for the Chula Vista Police Department, and Phil Collum graciously agreed to meet with us and have a conversation about what it feels like to be a gay man, a man of color, in this time of protests and Black Lives Matter and some of the perceptions of the police as not advocating for people of color.
Yeah. And so our conversation was really fruitful. Again, Phil is an incredible part of our community. He's been here for over 10 years. And we're just really excited to be able to share this conversation with you. Again, we want to ask our community to enter into this conversation with open hearts and open minds, to hear the perspective of just one person talking about their experience. But we believe that as we open ourselves up to any kind of conversation across divides and in this kind of mixed up moments of our history together, that God can speak and begin a real healing work from Mission Gathering outward into the world. So with that said, here's our conversation with Phil Collum.
Sure. Thank you so much, Pastor Brennan, Pastor Wendy, It's an absolute honor to speak with you today about some of the challenges we're struggling with as a culture, as a community. But most of you know me as Phil Collum. Most of you in the congregation probably know me from sitting way in the back of the room on the second floor doing audio, visual, and lights on a regular basis. I've been a part of Mission Gathering for over 10 years, for multiple locations of Mission Gathering, and it's been a wonderful blessing to be a part of. My husband introduced me to Mission Gathering well, over a decade ago, obviously, and it's been fantastic ever since. I've really been proud of Mission Gathering's willingness to step in to movements and step into challenges rather than stepping away from them, and I see this as part of this. What some of you know, many of you may not know, is I also serve as a police captain in the Chula Vista Police Department. I worked in the profession of law enforcement and public safety for well, actually over 30 years now. I've been with Chula Vista for 25 of those years. I spent another couple of years up in Santa Cruz, California, up in Central California, which is where I had gone to school, yay banana slugs. And again, it's just a pleasure to be here and hopefully answer any questions and talk about the unique perspectives, especially as a Black man in law enforcement today.
Yeah, Phil, I want to express my gratitude for you being here, because I would imagine you've been in a difficult position in many different contexts, but especially now. So the question I have to start with, and we've discussed a little bit of this, is what was your experience with racism growing up? And did you dream of becoming a police officer? And did you feel conflicted about that when you pursued a career in law enforcement?
Thank you for the question. You know, my background, my familial background, I'm one of, well, technically 3 siblings. I grew up with my sister most of the time, and a half brother we did not grow up with. He lived on the other side of the coast. My mother and father divorced when we were young, and I spent about a good half of my life living with my mother, raised in a household with 2 other strong women, and then spent the later half of my youth with my father in central San Diego. I went to school at Samuel Gompers in San Diego. Now, at the time, this was my sort of first introduction, I guess, consciously to race relations in our culture was actually through my experience at Encanto Elementary and then Samuel Gompers Secondary School, which back then was a junior high school. And that was a magnet program. It was designed for to draw students back in the day in the interest of integration by having a very, very strong math, computer, and science curriculum, very advanced curriculum. And through doing that, drawing students from outside Southeast San Diego, outside the barrio, outside the ghetto, in to attend this strong program and thus integrate with the Black and brown students that were there. Now, strangely enough, if anybody's had experience with magnet schools, great, I guess, idea, doesn't work out that way because what we ended up having, quite honestly, was an extremely segregated school. We had a bunch of kids busing into the school. I was one of those because I didn't live in that area of the school. I actually lived in Golden Hill. Now, this is way back in the day when Golden Hill was a ghetto. I know that's hard to think of these days. But nonetheless, a good distance away, so I was bused in as well. And in order to get me into the school, again, keep in mind, the goal was integration. And so they were honestly looking for kids that did not fit the typical racial background of the community, therefore essentially not Black kids. And in all honesty, I remember as a kid hearing a story from my mother where the only way she could get me into the school was she asked the district whether or not, you know, in terms of the application for the school, quite honestly, whether they looked into the answers she wrote. And they told her, quite frankly, no, we don't. And your son appears to be a good match, but unfortunately he's essentially the wrong race. And so what she did is she just wrote that I was white on the application, and I was accepted into the school. And then I entered into this attempted integration, but sadly segregated environment where all of the kids that were bused in, which primarily consisted of white, middle-class kids from around the community, around the county, were in utterly separate classes with an utterly separate track from the kids that were in the local community that weren't part of this advanced magnet program. And it became abundantly clear to me through my later years, especially as high school, to kind of watch and see this happen. And over the years of my maturity, since obviously beyond high school and growing up as an adult, to reflect back and think about what those impacts meant for me. And to answer your second question, no, I didn't dream of being a police officer. I actually, I really just kind of fell into the job. I was up in Santa Cruz at the time. I needed to make some money, quite honestly. You know, my father couldn't provide the amount of support that I needed. He was completely paying for my school, which was wonderful, but not much more than that. And so I needed to get a job. And a friend of mine at the time, I was running a DJ show at the local college radio station, an R&B show that ran multiple times weekly. It was pretty popular. I think they thought I had a good voice for that. And for some reason, they equated that to being a police dispatcher, where there happened to be job openings at the time that I was looking for a job. So my first foray into law enforcement was just looking for a job, quite honestly. And I was introduced to this dispatch job. I applied. I scored really well. But as it so happens, they couldn't accept me for that job because I needed part-time work because I was a full-time student and they didn't have any part-time positions. So instead, they offered me this job that was something new at the time. It was called a community service officer. And I accepted that as a part-time position, and I just fell in love with it. I loved, quite honestly, being outdoors in nature. I loved not being in a cubicle in a box to work. I sort of was my own boss, you know, when I was walking around on my own. And at the same time, I got to make and build connections with the community. That was part of the role as a community service officer. That name is implicit in what I had to do. And I really, really enjoyed meeting and talking to people of all different backgrounds and getting different perspectives and different opinions, whether or not I agree with them or not all the time. But that was definitely something I enjoyed. And so that led to additional jobs in the law enforcement profession, community service officer. I became a police dispatcher actually after I actually left college early for a full-time job for a little while, a reserve, like volunteer police officer, and eventually a full-time police officer, which started in 1992 in Santa Cruz. So I was not one of those kids that grew up wanting to be a police officer. I'm also never one of those kids that was bullied or anything like that. I just simply fell into the job with good fortune because I loved the job and I have loved it even after, like I said, almost 30 years in the profession now, well, over 30 years in the profession, still love it for this day. I would also like to add, if I could, that, you know, I believe in all that is right and good about the profession of public safety, of law enforcement. I think of it as a public safety profession, much like my sisters and brothers in the firefighting profession or in the medical profession. We are all involved in securing and helping the safety of the public. The culture of the organization where I work is unique. In fact, our city is managed by a newly announced strong female city manager. Our mayor is a strong mayor, Mary Casillas Salas, many know that. And our chief of police is a strong female chief of police, Roxana Kennedy. So probably the three top leaders in our city are all women. And that means something for the diversity of our organization and something for the culture of the organization that I represent. So I would also say that I feel blessed to have found Chula Vista when I moved back down to San Diego, and have absolutely loved it there ever since, and still love it to this day, notwithstanding all the challenges.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that. First of all, I didn't know you had so many different career paths, like radio DJ. Oh my goodness. But so you've talked about, you've been in this field for 30 years now, and obviously a lot has happened locally, nationally, globally in the past 30 years. And especially right now, with all of your intersecting identities and being in law enforcement, especially over the past month or so, when there's been these videos of people of color, Black men getting killed by police officers and public outcry, a lot of it focused on the police. And I just wonder, what are you thinking? How are you processing this as you do your job these days?
Yeah, it's not easy, obviously. I will tell you, I was in obviously law enforcement. If you looked at the dates, I was beginning my law enforcement career when the Rodney King incident happened, and I remember those days well. Brandon, I'm not even sure if you were alive in that time. I'd have to look at the calendar, but seen that, and I will say that for public safety professionals in general, including law enforcement and others in the public safety realm, firefighters and emergency medical staff, today is a far more difficult environment to work in for a variety of reasons, both social and professional. And you're right, my intersection of culture identity, be it as an African American in law enforcement during those times and these times today, as a gay male in law enforcement in those times to these times today, being seen by others as too white in those times and these times today, and being seen by others again as Black in those times and these times today. It is challenging. When I see the videos or hear the stories of people that have had negative interactions or violent interactions or entirely illegal and inappropriate interactions with law enforcement, I probably, like anyone, am shocked and dismayed and disappointed and frustrated. I have never seen anything like we have seen recently. Horrendous videos of tragic circumstances in which officers, for one reason or another, I couldn't get into their heads, but made horrible decisions, or perhaps failed to think, or perhaps acted on biases, whether they be explicit biases or implicit biases that they have. And every single time that happens, it's disheartening, it's saddening, it's frustrating, whether it happens on the opposite side of the coast or right in our own neighborhood. We are ever conscious that it is very, very common and even expected in our communities that we serve, that where one law enforcement person, wherever they may be, acts with misconduct, that we are all held accountable to that. So at the same time, we are conscious internally that we are all people. We are all human beings. Behind every uniform that a law enforcement person wears is just a human and just a member, usually, of that same community with which they are charged to pay 24 hours, 7 days a week attention to the safety of and to serve. And it is difficult at the same time, regardless of my race, my background, my culture, it's difficult at the same time to be painted with the same broad brush, the same stereotypical wide scope review that all police officers and all police cultures and all police departments must be like that one there, because I've seen that one, and now I've seen this one, and now I've seen that one. And even though there are millions and millions of police interactions, every single month throughout the country, we have thousands and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of police interactions, even in our small community in Chula Vista, every single year. These few incidents say something to a certain number of the population of all cultures that says, well, then all police must be bad, or that the policing profession is inherently wrong or even inherently evil to some extent. And knowing who I am as a person, what my beliefs are, the organization that my chief of police, for example, has set up is just utterly different from all of that. It is, of course, hard to hear, as much as I wouldn't want for our law enforcement personnel, the people that work for me, to expect that everybody that is of a certain culture or of a certain race or of a certain background is the same. It is hard when people look at us and say that we are all the same. Now, that being said, at the same time, I'm fully conscious of our role in society. Again, I believe in all that is good and right in this role. If you look across the globe, you can find locations with little order and maintenance of order, or law enforcement, the enforcement of the laws, even the social contract by which we all agree to participate in as members of society, and the challenges that exist there as well. So as much as it's hard to be painted with a broad brush, to be put into a box as a stereotype, I also recognize that, okay, but nonetheless, we stand up. We are the ones that have the power, right? I understand that. And so we can accept, we have broad enough shoulders, so to speak, to accept the fingers pointed at us, regardless of whether something is our particular fault at all. I'd also like to add that we we are smart enough to know, in the leadership of our organization at least, is that we can only see what we can see, and we could have giant blind spots. In fact, we know, of course, there are people in our organization that perhaps haven't been caught yet, perhaps are acting inappropriately. And so as much as I say, well, we don't all want to be put in the same box, we also at the same time recognize, but it's important to hear what people's perception is of that box, so that we can try to do everything we can to make sure we are recruiting the right people, hiring the right people, training them the proper way, and creating a culture of honest, ethical law enforcement and community combination that helps us police, I guess, for lack of a better word, in a way that not just that we should, according to the law, but also in the way that our community expects and needs. So it's challenging every single time. When I see those videos, I mean, obviously we were all shocked by what happened in Minneapolis, and the vile and violent misconduct by those officers. Not misconduct doesn't even cut it, right? The vile, illegal murder, quite honestly, of those officers. I have never in my career, a 30-year career, seen so many chiefs of police and police agencies so quickly denounce and call it out for what it was, murder. And that says something. We are disgusted by that, or by any other vile conduct by police personnel, as probably any member of the community is. And as a Black man myself, and recognizing that what we're talking about isn't just disparity in policing and law enforcement, but yes, it is that and more. It is also disparity in the culture, and disparity in the institutions, and disparity amongst the community. And all of those things affect law enforcement's role with the different communities that we serve and the communities that we represent. And so it's equally hard as a Black man, as much as it is when you hear a offensive remark about being gay. It's offensive and horrendous and hurtful when cops around this country, or even around the world, do things that are hurtful to our entire profession. And I do consider it a profession. We, those of us that have been in it for some length of time, we spend years and years and years in very advanced training with leaders all over the world. We just, sometimes our own personnel can't seem to get out of their own way, and it creates more challenges. We always like to say that we are built as a law enforcement organization on community trust, because without the community trust, we couldn't do anything. Let's just be real. So we really like to hold true to that, and when people fail to do that, that is incredibly challenging for us, as much as it is for me personally.
So this is a surprisingly emotional conversation as I'm listening to what you're saying, because I think it's really important for our people to know that what they are seeing here with you is exactly who we know you to be personally. And that's a person of integrity and love, and actually, like, you're a really gentle, good person. At the same time, I am super complicit in being one of those people that's not so surprised when we see what we see in Minneapolis, because I have this perception of law enforcement as inherently corrupt. That this is a system that came from, corralling slaves, and that, and I'm speaking not as what I think everybody should believe, but sharing my own biases. So my question for you is specifically about Black Lives Matter. Is there a perception within law enforcement that Black Lives Matter is anti-police? But I also want to know, when you guys are seeing like what we saw in La Mesa, which was part of what triggered the La Mesa protests, do you feel empowered to speak out against that, and to speak out against the other biases that you might experience? Or is there a lot of pressure to be silent about that?
So I'll try to answer the second part of your question first. Do I feel empowered to speak out about that? Yes, extremely. Just this very morning, I've been communicating with Kelso Benji. Kelso Benji is a lieutenant I've known for years and years at the San Diego Police Department. He also happens to be the local chapter president of the Black Peace Officers Association. I have had so many challenging and at the same time moving, heartfelt conversations with Black and brown police officers in our organization, and at the same who are struggling with the same things that I am struggling with in terms of their intersection of identity and culture in this time. And Kelso Benji, as a spokesperson for Black police officers throughout this region, has been in the news. He's been spending countless hours, as you can imagine, trying to articulate the challenges of both law enforcement, the challenges for the African American population or Black and brown people as he sees it, as well as the challenges specifically for Black and brown police officers in this time. And I am in a unique position. Number one, I've always been willing to say what's on my mind, quite frankly. If anybody knows me, you may know me as a debater from time to time. I'm never really shy about sharing what's on my mind. At the same time, of course, I'm in a role in the job where I've been in my particular department for over 25 years. I've been involved for 30 years. I'm young. I'm a shy 50 years old, and so even though that's young to some, is really old to a lot, right? And so I'm an adult, and I have enough personal belief in speaking up, in speaking my mind. Not only that, I'm also a leader, right? I serve underneath the chief. There's only 3 of us, and so I serve as sort of 1/3 of the upper echelon of our organization. I'm actually in that 1/3. I'm number 2. So as a leader as well, I feel responsibility to speak up, not only about policing in this time and what it means. By the way, not just for Black and brown officers, but for officers of all kind. They're struggling with this as well, because they're all disgusted by what they see on TV in terms of police misconduct, because they know internally that is not them. So, but specifically for Black and brown officers, as well as for gay officers, as well as people who aren't Black and brown, but are willing to listen, or aren't gay, but are willing to listen, to speak up, to share my experiences, because I have a firm, passionate belief in the value of diversity of ideas, diversity of concepts, diversity of cultures, diversity of backgrounds, in that the more diversity we have in an organization or an entity, the better that entity will be able to form its culture and make decisions that match those of the community. So part of my role as a leader is to speak up. Now, I will say that like I said, I've had gut-wrenching conversations with Black and brown officers in our own department, and that may be less willing to speak up. They may not feel comfortable, or they may not quite feel to be in the position. Officers that are brand new, officers that are maybe as supervisors up to a certain level. And so that, I think it definitely runs the gamut. As much as the gay community knows what it's like to be in the closet and not want to talk about their sexual identity, it is challenging for Black and brown officers in the realm of a culture that is primarily dominated by white males, to speak openly about their challenges and struggles as a Black or brown police officer. So yes, I'm willing to speak up. I feel that is part of my responsibility. Years and years and years ago, I made a conscious decision that the best thing that I could do for my organization was to stay and promote within the organization, so that I could affect change. And to this day, I'm writing policies and writing training guidelines that I hope at least are moving our organization forward. But not everybody is in the position that I am, and I also honor and respect that. So with that, now that I've my long-winded way, I've answered your second half of the question. I don't recall what your first half of the question was.
About Black Lives Matter. What's the perception of the Black Lives Matter movement?
Thank you. Yeah. So the question of how officers perceive Black Lives Matter in general. Now, again, recognizing that even just answering this question, I'm painting in a broad brush. I'm providing my perception of what I hear from a lot of police officers, but certainly I must say that not what all police officers believe. But I would say by and large, police officers in general tend to see Black Lives Matter as anti-police. Now, that's a discussion that I've been having with staff as well, because that's not how I see it. I think, pardon me, I think that belief that Black Lives Matter is somehow anti-police comes out of a number of places and sources. People's own personal beliefs that they bring to the matter, people's own relative perspective on valuing one particular type of human over another, even though that's not what Black Lives Matter is about, but that's the way some people perceive it, right? As well as where people get their information. You know, if you watch Judge Report and Fox News all the time, you might have a certain perspective. If you watch only MSNBC and CNN, you might have a different political perspective, and that has an impact on the way you view social society and social organizations. So I was just having this discussion yesterday with my chief of police and my two co-captains about Black Lives Matter, and we all understand. My partner, for example, Captain Vern Sallee, there's pictures of him, on the internet. He's a white, traditional, classical white male police captain. He's sort of almost exactly what you would, I guess, envision in a way. And yet, he was out there a few days ago with a demonstration in Chula Vista, very peaceful, a very moving and beautiful one in many ways. Not only kneeling in prayer with a pastor who came out and prayed over the entire group, but also raising a fist against police brutality and against inequality and inequity in institutions of all types, including the policing institution. And that actually caused a lot of stir amongst the staff in our organization. Well, wait, why is this captain, one of our leaders, out there, in their mind, raising a fist against policing? And I told my staff, as well as the captain himself, Vern Sallee, as well as every time we have met as in small groups and teams to prepare to go out into the field one day and to do the type of policing, the type of public service that we are charged to do. Every time I meet with them, especially since that is, open up an opportunity to have a conversation and to share my feelings and perspectives, not only as a police leader and how it is so crucially important right now that we not only listen, but that we be seen as well as listening, that people know that they can be heard. Not only that, but where we support ideals, that we are seen supporting those ideals. So how important that is. But on a personal note, how much it meant to me personally that this guy, one of my peers, another one of their leaders, is out there supporting the same ideals that Black Lives Matter stand for. And that's that, yes, Black lives do matter, right? They are not to be kneeled upon as though they don't, in anguish for 10 minutes. Black lives do matter. The ideal, certainly nobody in this community, in my belief, wants racist police officers. That's something we can all get behind, right? Nobody wants, I would happily have less violence in the police department. I'd have less violence in the entire community. I will raise my fist to that every single day. I want more diversity, 100%. I want better funding for alternatives to policing to keep the community safe, 100%. I think unanimously, any police officer that has given any thought to this matter and has any depth of intelligence would agree with that. But sometimes recognizing that some people don't think that much about it, perhaps, or maybe they just have different opinions, and therefore it's really simple to paint the Black Lives Matter movement with the same broad brush that police officers are worried about being painted as a police officer, right? So in general, yeah, I believe that Black Lives Matter has a perception within the law enforcement culture, unfortunately, of being, say, anti-police. It's a really oversimplified term, but I guess put simply, that's the way it would be. But there's definitely a lot of us that, quite honestly, we have some really intelligent cops. Most of our people have college degrees. We're not, as we would call it, the knuckle dragging thugs that perhaps people stereotypically think of police officers. We have guys with multiple masters and doctors, and they're well studied, and they pay attention to the news from around the world and read a lot, and more than I do. And I would say the vast majority of the agency that I know best of our agency knows that that is not what Black Lives Matter is about. And the mantra, Black Lives Matter, is something that they and all of us can and should be behind. It's not to say there are some that feel otherwise, but that's my general belief. And I tend to believe that, again, majority of people feel that. Unfortunately, it's a lot easier to stay silent about that feeling. It's really hard to talk about personal feelings about this kind of stuff, especially if there are people that are very vocal in the organization amongst their peers and sharing an opposite opinion or what they heard on Fox News or MSNBC for that matter. So those challenges exist as well.
Yeah. Well, Phil, thank you so much for taking some time to be with us this morning. We're really grateful that you're willing to share with us. We're grateful that you're a part of our community, and know that we're praying for you and Chula Vista and San Diego Police as we move forward in this hard, difficult season, and we try to navigate as a community how we can become more just and more like we believe God is calling us to be. So thank you.
Yeah, Phil, this was amazing. I'm really grateful, and my prayer is that this spreads far and wide, and that it empowers all of us to act and think from a little bit different perspective.
Well, thank you both for leading this community and leading this movement, as well as this very discussion. I was honored when you asked, and I'm really happy to talk about, especially in these times, the things that we're talking about. And we're just barely scratching the surface, of course. So I continue to invite any member of our community, of our congregation, or any community for that matter. Cops are people, and we are more than happy to share. I know I am more than happy to share on a personal level what things mean to me. And it's a conversation that I think needs to happen, not just about policing, but about the larger issues facing our culture and our societies as well. So thank you both. God bless you both and this entire community. And I know we will all get through this together.
Well, thank you.